Mark it.
Got it.
Just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
My name is Aron Hyman. I'm an investigative journalist.
Set the scene.
On the morning, it was sometime in July 2016, midwinter. If I recall correctly, my news editor at the time, she had gotten a tip-off that something had happened at Spier Wine Estate. Somebody had died, and a big corporate executive was involved. We didn't have the details then, but it did seem like there may have been a murder. There definitely was a homicide, but naturally, with the nature of the people involved, this was a huge corporation with a big reputation, and the person involved, being so high up in this company, also had quite a reputation. So there must have been some crisis management from their side as well. We started making phone calls. We started asking the police what had happened. I can't remember exactly what they said, but they were investigating the death of Susan Rohde, and we didn't have a name at that stage. But we started making calls. We figured out that it was Liugef and Sotheby's, and I think we then learned that Jason Rohde was the person who may have been involved in this to some extent. We certainly found out that it was his wife who was deceased.
Stellenbosch is just an idyllic sort of small town. It's the hiding place of South Africa's elite. I mean, you could also probably get a house here for a reasonable price, but it really is just it's the type of place where you really would want to live. It's surrounded by mountains, by vineyards. There's a river that runs through it. I've tried catching fish in the river. I don't think there are any. And yeah, it's just a beautiful, serene town. It's unique in South Africa in that sense, in that it very much has a, not that I've been to Western Europe, but it kind of has a Western European small town, small village feel to it.
What kind of murders have happened here that's been in the news a few times for like unusual types of murders? So
I would say that the one murder that was quite bizarre, which was very brutal. It was very almost. It was so sad and tragic in the way that it happened. Was the murder of a young student, Hannah Cornelius. She was murdered in. I can't remember the year, but yeah, that was quite a shocking one. And then the other murder that really stood out was the murder of Susan Rohde, the Spier murder, as it's come to be known.
Tell us about the Susan Rohde murder. What actually happened?
Yeah, so it was. The police were investigating a murder for about a month before they actually arrested Jason Rohde. They actually arrested him in Johannesburg at his house in Bryanston a month after the murder had happened. They arrested him with a bunch of armed, almost like I think his defense was describing it sort of as a SWAT team who went and took him in Bryanston. And they then flew him down to Cape Town, or to Stellenbosch rather. He appeared in the Stellenbosch Magistrates Court, I think on 23rd of August 2016, and that was the first time that we had actually learned that he was now charged with the murder of his wife. There was, I think before that, we were reporting in the newspapers that she had been strangled with a hair iron cord. But when he appeared in court, he was adamant that she had committed suicide. And that formed the basis of his defense throughout his trial. So, yeah, that, I mean, essentially what it later transpired had happened, and I guess this was the version that was being put forward by him and by the state, was that there was a long relationship. Jason Rohde was a pathological liar. He was an adulterer, and his wife had become increasingly paranoid about the sorts of escapades that he was having. She had found out that he had an affair with Jolene Altersky, who was also a female employee at Leo Geffen Sotheby's in the Atlantic seaboard in Cape Town, and he would regularly come down to Cape Town to visit her. What transpired throughout the trial was it was this meticulous dissection of how a marriage sort of disintegrates through lies, through paranoia, through infidelity, and eventually culminates in a night of fighting and eventually a very personal and intimate murder. Yeah, so I guess that was the basis of it.
How did you...
We're going to turn left here and see the Stellenbosch Magistrates Court where he first appeared. It's also one of the oldest buildings in Stellenbosch. So up ahead here, the white building where the South African flag is hanging, that's the Stellenbosch Magistrates Court. That's where Jason Rohde first made his first court appearance, and it's there where he first gave his version of events, saying that his wife had committed suicide, and he applied for bail there. As far as I recall, he was granted bail for quite an astronomical amount.
Did you ever believe his version of events? Like, as a journalist, is it your job to get both sides?
So we initially, my colleagues or my news editors at our newsroom in Cape Town had spoken with his lawyers because he was being questioned by the police, which is sort of a de facto thing that police do when there's an inquest in a murder or even in a suicide. So he was the last person to have seen her alive, and they were questioning him. And you know, we had asked his lawyers. He'd already gotten a lawyer at that time. We had asked his lawyers, like, you know, what was happening. His lawyers didn't necessarily want to comment at the time, but he was being questioned. And naturally, after he was arrested, he had to give his version of events. And at first, it was very difficult to know what exactly was going on. I mean, this guy was we didn't know what the motive was for this murder. You know, which the state was saying this is a murder that happened and he was responsible for it. Couldn't quite figure out what the motive was. Clearly it wasn't money. They were not wanting for anything. So it was a bit of a mystery at that stage. She had been strangled with a hair iron cord. So it was, I think they very quickly put up the defense that no, she'd actually hung herself in the bathroom of their hotel room.